Welcome back to another youth-centered podcast. This is our third part in a six-part series on our Savage leadership. Today I'm very excited to have our town manager, Melinda Rodrigues, here to come in and talk to us a little bit about her leadership style and to kind of get to know a little bit of how she leads this town and obviously some crazy first year and a half that she's been here. So, Melinda, thanks for coming on our youth-centered podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I'm excited to be here.
And as we do all the time, we like our guests to kind of do their own bio. So if you could just spend a minute or two to talk to us a little bit about the Melinda Rodrigues files. Who is she, where'd she come from, and where we're at now?
Absolutely. So I live in Danvers, Mass. with my husband, Dave, and our two elementary school age daughters and our dog. I grew up in the city of Everett. Lived there until 2 years ago, actually, when I made the Great American Pilgrimage to the suburbs as my kids started elementary school. I went for my undergrad at Boston University. My degree's in journalism. And then I got my law degree from Northeastern University. I am licensed to practice law in Massachusetts. I started in municipal government when I was 14 years old with a job at the library. And I have loved it since. I started in the city of Everett in 2008 as legal counsel and then the mayor's chief of staff. About 2015, I went to work for the town of Sudbury, where I was their town manager for 4 years, and I have been here in North Andover for the last 18 months.
Absolutely, and it's been an interesting 18 months, which we'll get into that. So, Melinda, we're asking all of our guests some similar questions and other different ones every week. But the first thing we want to ask you is, how would you describe your leadership style?
Sure. So I think I'm big on collaboration. It's really important to me to build teams and to have those teams feel effective and supported. I think a big part of my leadership style is recognition and trying to build those around me up so that we can all be successful together. I always say to people that I'm only as good as the 161 people that I work with, and that really rings true to me. So I really try to be a team builder, a listener as much as I can, and really try to just build those relationships that allow us all to succeed.
Awesome. And when we look at leadership style, we look at the basis of leadership values. Do you have some leadership values that you live by?
I think for me, just always trying to do what is right or what I think is right is something that I just try to live by in both my personal life and in my professional life. It's not always easy to do the right thing, right? A lot of the time it's harder to do the right thing, and you may not always make a lot of friends doing the right thing. Sure. But it's something that you can feel good about at the end of the day. So for me, that's one of the main values that I try to carry. Treating people with kindness and respect. When I speak to residents, I think about how I would want to be treated. I try to really think about the town as not only a government, but also as a business. And we have customers, and customers should be treated with respect. People spend a lot of money to live in North Andover and have the amenities that we offer, and they deserve to be treated that way. So I think probably respect is the second value that I hold on to pretty dearly.
Interesting. Very good. You've had a number of stops in your professional career. You are an attorney by trade. Basically, have worked in a library as you started when you were younger. And then obviously in municipal government in three what I consider very different type communities when you look at Everett, Sudbury, and North Andover. How has each one of these stops in your professional career made who you are today as a leader?
Yeah, so I think that I certainly have had challenges. When I first started out in my career, I did not think I'd be going into municipal government, despite my love for it. When I was born, my uncle was the mayor of the city of Everett. There's pictures of me sitting in his chair, a chair that I sat in later as chief of staff. But honestly, I fell into municipal government more by mistake than anything else. I had just taken the bar exam. I was waiting for my bar results. A friend was running for mayor. I actually had a job at the district attorney's office that I had planned to take, and I didn't pass the bar. I failed by a point. And so I kind of had to revisit what I was doing. And I went to the city of Everett kind of licking my wounds a little bit, studied again, passed, and was able to kind of build up from there. And once I started doing it, especially getting back to where I grew up, it was just so rewarding. And it's so nice to see the benefit of what you're doing and how it is rewarding to other people as well. But the 3 different communities that I've worked in, while different, are all the same, right? It's all just people who want to have a good quality of life, who want to be treated respectfully, who deserve to be treated respectfully, who are working hard to afford where they're living, and are expecting a certain level of service. And we are trying to deliver to all of those people as best as we can. So while they're all different, and they are, right? Everett isn't a really urban city. Sudbury is a very rural community, and North Andover kind of lands maybe right in the middle of those, which is why I think I like it so much. At the end of the day, I was doing the same thing in all of those places.
Interesting. Let me go back to you mentioned that you didn't pass the bar the first time. And obviously, what was your resiliency to obviously pass it the next time you did it? And, I look at some of my own things professionally that sometimes you look at that a misfortune ends up becoming a silver lining in a way. How would you describe that first initial that you didn't pass the bar and your drive to pass it the next time you took it?
Yeah, it was a shock to me in a lot of ways. I always have been a really hard worker. My mom says that about me a lot, that I'm somebody who always has just worked hard. Nothing has ever come easy to me, but it's always been something that I've worked at, and I've been successful because of that. So for me, working really hard through 3 years of law school and then studying for the bar exam and then not passing was definitely a huge slap to my confidence, and probably in a good way in the end, although it didn't feel like it at the time, because it certainly helped me grow as a person. I was 25 years old, went to law school right out of undergrad, and it certainly helped me do a lot of growing up. I remember someone saying to me, do you know what you call someone who passed the bar exam the second time? And I'm like, oh, here it comes. And they said, a lawyer. And I was like, huh. You're right? No one's ever asked me if I passed the first time. I say I'm a lawyer and no one ever questions it. And I went on after that to work for a bar review company where I actually worked with people who didn't pass the bar exam. And I would sit with them and go over their essays and teach them kind of where they didn't do well, and how to improve the next time. And when they offered me that job, I said, well, I didn't pass. And they said, well, you passed now. And I'm like, oh, you're right. I did, right? And that kind of helped me get over that hump. So it was definitely a learning experience, but it also taught me that, just because you don't do something right the first time doesn't mean you're not going to nail it the second time. And it's okay to screw up. Right? And I'm still screwing up all the time, and we all are. So, it definitely was a good learning experience for me in the end.
Awesome, and great advice to a bunch of our younger kids that will be listening to this podcast. When you look at your professional career, and even as you were even a student, who were some of your leadership mentors? And if you don't want to say my name, what type of mentors did you have?
Yeah, so I think that, as a student and as just a child generally, my family was always really involved in local government. So like I said, my uncle was the mayor and then went on to be state rep. Another one of my uncles was on the city council. My brother's a teacher. My mom was my school nurse. There always was just this kind of, you gave back, and that's what you did in the community. You always just gave back. And so that always has been ingrained in me. As a boss, I was blessed in college and right after college to be able to work for Senator Jarrett Barrios from Cambridge. He's still a dear friend now, but he was the kind of boss who motivated you to be the best that you could be all the time. I joke with people that he used to call me at 5 o'clock in the morning to remind me of what he had thought about during the night, and I would write them down and then go back to sleep. But he always was trying to do the right thing, even when it wasn't the popular thing. He always was kind to everyone. And he would go out of his way to be kind and remember people. He knew people's kids' grandchildren's names. He just was one of those people that I wanted to be like. And he really taught me about customer service, which was really important to me. And so that's the kind of leader that I flourish under. I think someone who shows up and is true to his word and really just walks the walk. And that's the kind of person that I want to be. I have a lot of trouble working with leaders that don't do that maybe will dictate how something should be done, but wouldn't be willing to roll their sleeves up and do it. And I think that's how we lead, by just doing every day.
Awesome. So as you get to your job in the municipal government. How have some of those previous jobs prepared you to be the town manager in North Andover?
Well, I spent about 6 years working as a bank teller, all through when I was 16 until I graduated from college. Every weekend, every Saturday morning, and people are passionate about their money. And so, I think I learned probably a lot of my customer service skills there, right? You're 16 years old, working at Bank of America, and it's your first real job, making $11 an hour. And, you really have to learn a lot when you're working in retail with people, right? And I think probably everybody should work a job like that at some point, because it really does teach you a lot about customers. So I think that has always been a good base for me. And then, working in Everett and Sudbury, like I said, we're doing the same thing everywhere, right? We're creating budgets, we're working on capital, we're dealing with quality of life issues, right? Like I go and I talk to the elementary school students and we talk about how if government didn't exist, right, and we weren't doing our jobs, nobody would pick up your trash and you wouldn't have clean water, right? What we're doing every day makes a real difference. Working in two really diverse places has helped me kind of learn a lot about how people operate, what people's goals are, what's important to different demographics. But like I said, at the end of the day, we're all really the same. And diversity is not just diversity, the way we think of it classically. It's also diversity of opinions and diversity of politics. And working in so many diverse places has really allowed me to be able to embrace people of all kinds, I think.
Actually, perfect. You came to North Andover at what I would call an interesting time. We had just been coming out of a really rough time with the gas crisis. And you were at the tail end of that and dealing with the fallout from what it was going to be in everything from rebuilding a lot of the things around here infrastructure-wise. And then we get hit with this thing called a global pandemic in your first full year here. How has those challenges affected you professionally, but also personally, in how your leadership probably has been tested during these crazy times?
Sure. So like everybody else, I'm exhausted, I think. It's been a long year, but I feel for the employees and residents here in town because, well, it's been a long year for me. It's been a long 3 years for everybody else. I certainly see really the aftershocks of the Columbia gas crisis, not only in our residents who might call because they see an Eversource truck and they want to know what's going on, to really our employees who honestly haven't really been able to take a vacation in the last 3 months. I look back at some of our real heroes of the Columbia gas crisis, and I think of Chief McCarthy and Chief Gray and our building inspector Paul Hutchins, and they've been on for 3 years straight, right? They went right from basically the town blowing up to a pandemic, and that's a pretty incredible way to live. And so, I think of them and what they've been through, professionally, and it does affect you personally as well. And so, one of the goals for me over the next year is figuring out how I make all of those people go on vacation. But, I think it's certainly been trying. I have enjoyed over the last maybe 3 weeks finally being able to pick some of the non-COVID related stuff up off the floor. And it's felt so good to do normal things again, which sounds weird, right? But getting to deal with kind of what other people might think is a mundane issue, I'm like, yes, I'm not talking about COVID right now. And it's just, it feels good because it has become a lot. And I think we've all become almost numb to it, which isn't good either. Personally, I'm very excited to have my kids back in school, like I'm sure everyone else is. It's been tough to watch them through all of this with trying to be home and figuring out how we juggle everything. It certainly has helped us all come closer together and grow, I think. One of the things that's been hard for me professionally is that I usually like to spend the first year in a new community getting to know everyone, and that's been really hard to do over Zoom, right? And there's still people I'm meeting for the first time and trying to build relationships with, and that's been a struggle. And so I think one of the things that we're all going to face over the next couple of months is this return to normal isn't really so normal on our insides, right? And there's going to be a real challenge in not burying ourselves inside of our offices, and I always say that we go to people where they are because that's where people talk to us, right? Like if I go to the police department, instead of having the police chief come to me, I get to see all the people that work at the police department, and they tell me stuff, and I get to make relationships with them. But if I can't do that because I'm actually not supposed to go into their building because of COVID, that's an impediment, and I have to try to break those barriers down now and make everybody feel safe, which is tough.
For sure. I've had the pleasure of working for every town manager that North Andover's ever had since it went to town management government. And we sometimes say, who's the right person for the right time? And I honestly believe you were the right town manager for these particular things that took place, specifically during the pandemic. And one of the reasons is, I believe you're a strong leader. I obviously work for you. I see it every day. But your humanistic approach to people, whether it be your employees, the residents, I think is one of your strongest suits. Is that just who you are?
So interesting. So I always say that, you're the right manager at the right time, and I feel like this is such a good fit for me. I think it probably is. It's interesting. I feel like many of the people who I work with here now and the residents that I chat with are almost like a second family to me. I spend more time here than I probably do at home most days. And I've developed really just deep-rooted respect for everybody that I work with and that I work for. And by work for, I mean not just the select board, but also the residents here. And I feel like everyone treats me so well, too, that we've really created this just real team dynamic. And when I talk about the team, right, I'm not just talking about my team of employees, but I'm talking about the team of volunteers, right, that are so important in getting the community to move forward, and the team of people who come to town meeting and vote. And it's just so many different aspects of ways to lead here. So yeah, I think, at the end of the day, sometimes I feel like everybody's mom, and maybe it's because I look like everybody's mom. But, I think that I'm able to really have just built these really strong relationships despite the pandemic with so many people here, and I'm looking forward to continuing to build on that. And a lot of that might be just because I just tell the truth, right? I'm transparent. I like to educate people on what we're doing because I'd like to know, right? And I always tell people I'm not classically trained in being a town manager, right? This is not what I thought I'd be doing. So I didn't take municipal accounting classes or, municipal HR classes, right? I learned it. But I learned it really in a layperson kind of way. And so I try to teach it to others in the same way, which I think people appreciate. And I also think that kind of helps build those relationships.
Yeah. You and your predecessor, I would consider two of the most transparent town managers I've worked for, and what I would call truth tellers. I'm a big believer in truth tellers. So is that part what drives and guides you in making tough decisions? Is that transparency?
Oh, definitely. I think the cover-up's worse than the crime, right? I always tell people that, right? When we're thinking about something we did wrong, I'm like, well, we did it wrong. Let's just say we did it wrong and then figure out how to do it better next time, right? And even if it's not wrong, there's always a better way to do something. We're always learning in these jobs, right? And so sometimes just owning that is really important. There's this company called ClearGov that we use here in town, and basically it's a user-friendly way to understand financial operations of municipal government. And the person that created that was a banker on State Street. And when he came in to present the software to me back when I worked in Sudbury and maybe in Everett too, he said to me, I lived in Hawkington, and I could not understand my town's budget. I'm a banker on State Street, and I can't understand my town's budget. That should not be happening, right? I mean, that's terrible. So, he has this amazing software, and we use it. It's on our website. If you click on financial transparency, it'll take you there. And basically, it breaks our budget down in a granular, understandable way. And you can even put your tax bill in. So let's say your tax bill is $7,400. You can put your tax bill in, and it will tell you how much you pay for office supplies for DPW, right? You pay $1 towards office supplies at DPW, right? It gets right down into the roots of the budget. It shows expenditures, right? It shows checks written. And I think, we need to approach all of government that way, right? We need to approach all of government in a way that everybody can understand what we're doing, because if it's confusing, if it's too complicated, there's a natural inclination that we're not doing the right thing, right? And so if we break it down in a way that everybody can understand, in a way that I can understand, right? I joke about that, but when you're not classically trained in something, sometimes you come at it from a different way. And it doesn't mean it's the wrong way, it just means that you're coming at it differently. And I think that I try to remember that and carry that we all should be a part of what's happening, right? Especially with town meeting form of government.
Sure.
I love it. Other people probably think I'm crazy, but as a muni nerd, for me, it's such a classic form of democracy, right? And, at town meeting, we all should be a player who feels confident in the way that we vote, right? And I know Rick has heard me say that government should be something that happens with you, not to you, right? And town meeting is the most classic definition of that, right? We're all coming together to make decisions for the town, right? But how do you make those decisions if we haven't been transparent about what's happening?
Absolutely. You're a veteran of municipal government now, but you're also someone that's still got a long history ahead of her. What do you do to grow your leadership?
Probably not enough. During the pandemic, it's been hard or maybe easier. I don't know. A lot of people have said to me, I've done so much professional development during the pandemic because it's all available online. And I'm like, yeah, but the most important part of those classes isn't really what the speaker's saying, no offense to the speaker, but it's the relationships you make with the people sitting around you, right? I've been really lucky that the town managers here in Merrimack Valley and the North Shore have really embraced me. And I'm including, we're all on text chains together talking about, when do we reopen this and what are you guys doing about that? And I'm able to build those relationships that way. And that's such a huge part of my professional development, is having those relationships and having those conversations. But I would love to someday take a pause and go back to the Kennedy School of Government and, do the mid-career classes. After I finish law school, I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to do any more schooling. That was a lot. But I think maybe as my kids get older, right, because they're little right now, and I'm able to kind of get more into our normal groove, I would love to be able to go back and look at something like that.
Absolutely. Let me throw a quote at you. We've been kind of giving each one of our guests a quote that kind of makes me think of you. So this one is from Bob Iger, who's the present CEO of Disney. The most important characteristic of a leader is optimism. I see this quote in you. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I'm sometimes maybe optimistic to a fault. Somebody will come to my office with what they think is a crisis, and I'm like, oh, that's it. Because there's nothing we really can't overcome. And at the end of the day, sometimes you might close your door and say, whew, that was a day, but guess what? Tomorrow's new, right? And we get to try it again. And so nothing that really happens is so bad, and that's kind of the way that I try to approach it. Like, oh, all right, this is a challenge, but it's exciting. We get to do something new, or we can make this better. And not only in my personal life, my professional life, but also really in my personal life. For me, I'm just a naturally optimistic person. I love what I do. I tell people all the time that if it stops being fun, I'm going to stop doing it. Sure. Because, I enjoy it. And because I enjoy it, I think I excel at it. So I try to keep at that all the time. And, over the last year, I think it's been easy to get kind of in a woe is me mentality. And for good reason. I mean, we've been through a lot, right? Everyone's mental health has suffered. We're all anxious. But I think every day it's felt a little bit easier. And when things start to feel a little bit easier, you can feel yourself walking up that hill. And I think that's huge. And also I think having little kids puts a lot of things into perspective. Sure. When I was in Everett before I had kids, things probably felt more like the end of the world to me than they do now. I remember coming home from work one day and I was telling my husband about something that had happened, and it had been a bad day, and I was grumpy. And my daughter at the time was probably maybe 6, and she's listening to the story, and she could see I'm upset, and she says to me, "Did someone die?" And I said, "No. Why did you think that?" And she's like, "Well, you seem so upset." And I was like, "She's right. Nobody died. Tomorrow we'll go back and we'll figure it out." And we did, right? So little kids do tend to put everything in perspective for you.
That is so true. As a father myself, that it put a lot of things in perspective when my kids would say things like that. Your husband, Dave, is also in municipal government. At one point, he actually worked in the community I grew up in, Winthrop. How has, his involvement been as a support to you? And how does it work with having two people in the household that are municipal employees?
Yeah, and it's been at times interesting, at times amazing. So Dave is my biggest cheerleader, my biggest supporter by far. And he ran for city council in Everett when I was working as the mayor's chief of staff. So that was interesting because, in the city, the council is pretty much the equivalency of both town meeting and the select board, really. And sometimes we didn't agree. And our neighbors would joke after watching a meeting that, did we bring it home and fight about it in the kitchen after? And we were both like, no, we drain the bathtub and continue on, right? But I do enjoy it much more when we work at two different places, that's for sure. But having someone who understands the challenges of our job is really helpful at home. There can be a lot of stressors, and additionally, I think having someone who understands the time commitment, right? There's some nights where we may not really see each other till Friday. Where I'll have a meeting Monday and he'll have a meeting Tuesday and I'll have a meeting Wednesday. And, we have a huge calendar on the wall where we write everything down so we make sure someone's home. And, I don't know that I would have so much understanding if he wasn't also going through the same thing that I'm going through every day. We try not to talk about it that much at home. We might come home and talk about something that happened that was unusual or interesting. But then we talk about our kids and normal things. We don't watch Park and Recreation or any of the other municipal government shows. We probably should. But, he's really been my biggest supporter. He's pushed me to make changes and try new things. When I went to Sudbury, Emma was 6 months old. Looking back, I was probably insane, right? I went from a 3-minute commute to what could be anywhere from an hour to 2 hours each way. But he recognized that I needed room to grow. He recognized that I was good at this job. He tells people all the time that the best public employee he knows lives in his house and it's not him. So, I'm very lucky and very blessed to have such a supporter.
Incredible. That's great. How is your leadership involved in other parts of your life? Maybe has helped you as the town manager in North Andover. What a lot of people don't know is you're actively involved with some things with your daughters. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually spend a lot of time trying not to be the manager in other things I do, which is hard, by the way, right? So I am a Girl Scout leader, a co-Girl Scout leader of 2 troops in Danvers, a Daisy troop and a Brownie troop. And by co, that means team. So I have to really work on not being the boss, which is not always easy. I've been basically in a leadership position since I was 25. So it's actually probably really good that I get to not be in a leadership position and all of these other things and just be a collaborator, which I enjoy and is something that I try to be, here as well, because I'm not always the best at everything, right? I don't know how to be the police chief. I don't know how to be the fire chief. I don't know how to be the town engineer. So I have to collaborate with all of those people and let them take the leadership, right? And so, that is an important lesson to learn through your entire life. I get to serve on my children's PAC, which is actually so interesting because their principal was my 7th grade social studies teacher. So, when you say all roads lead home, they certainly do, right? I still call him Mr. Obremski because he was Mr. Obremski to me and always will be Mr. Obremski. But, it certainly, it brings you back to the ground when you get to be involved with things in your community and you're just part of the team. And it's really important to find ways to be, part of the team, the worker bee, because it does keep you grounded.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, you are the town manager of North Andover, so you obviously are all of our bosses, division directors, department, and all of the employees. I think you said 161. What is your style or method of action in trying to build leadership qualities in your department and division directors?
Sure. So, I've been saying to people lately, and they probably roll their eyes at me, but, we spend a lot of time investing in our capital. We spend a lot of time investing in our buildings, working on Facilities Master Plan 2 right now. We buy a lot of rolling stock, but 80% of our budget is people, and we need to invest in them too. And, we haven't always, in municipal government generally, done a good job of that, right? It used to be people went into municipal government because there was amazing benefits. Well, guess what? The benefits stink now. And so we need to find other ways to build our people and get people to come. North Andover is unique in that we offer an education incentive and we pay for people's education. I've never worked in a place that does that before, and that's amazing. And not a lot of people take advantage of it.
Sure.
But we've tried to really build in a lot of training over the last year. I've been really blessed to be able to work with the Deputy Town Manager, DKC, who has an amazing HR background and really shares a lot of the philosophies that I do about investing in our members. So we're doing leadership training. We're doing training about customer service. We're doing training about mental health. We offered a mental health training about anxiety in mid-pandemic, and 60 people came. I went. I couldn't believe it. We have 161 employees, and 60 of them came to a training about mental health. It was pretty incredible to watch, and so I think really investing in people, letting them know you're invested in them, right? I think, everyone's not just an employee, we're part of a team, and we're willing to invest in everyone who wants to grow in the organization. And I think that people like that, they appreciate it, and especially when you mean it, when you're actually doing it. And the other thing I try to do is I try, and it's been hard during COVID, I try to just get us together, right? Like we got together this week at the youth center. God bless the youth center, hosted us, and we got to have a conversation about really important things, right? Town meeting and salary studies and all vacation carryover, right? All the things that we need to talk about when we're all together. But we also got to talk and see each other and hear from each other, and everything we do affects everything else that everyone else does. We can make a decision at the youth center and affect DPW or conservation or the fire department and not even realize it if we're not talking, right? So, we can invest in everybody through professional development, and that's really important. But I think we also need to take the time, the minute, to invest in each other as people. And the other thing that I think I've tried to do over the last year is just shout people out. We have Employee of the Year for the first time. We've never had an Employee of the Year.
Sure.
Caroline Ibbotson, our public health nurse, who could be more deserving of Employee of the Year than Caroline this year, right?
Absolutely.
Public health been thrust into the limelight. But also just, an email to all the other department heads when someone does an amazing job at a presentation or gets a grant or nails summer fun, right? Like, it's good to just shout people out and say, hey, someone did a good job. And you know what happens? 32 people are on our department head email, and everybody starts responding all. Like, way to go, Rick. You did a great job. Thanks for showing us how we could do it. And that goes a long way.
Sure. No. When they had a consultant come in to talk to us department heads, division heads about what we're looking for in a new town manager, those were the two areas that I was most outspoken about. I believed we need more training. I think what Dee and you and others are doing in the HR department is phenomenal. I think for the first time ever, especially with me who has a young staff, I'm always looking for as much training as possible as they can grow. And the second thing is, I just think, is being here 33 years, I never felt we did enough to show gratitude to our employees. And you and Dee have done a phenomenal job on that. And it is interesting, like when those emails come out, when Carolyn got and again, there's nobody better than Caroline to get the staff member of the year, but the reaction and how people were generally happy for each other, that's stuff that I think we've been looking for a long time. So as a town manager, you have to make hard decisions financially in terms of budgets. We could be in some tough years ahead, although I think it could be maybe a little bit better than we originally thought. How will your leadership be tested during these next couple of years as we get out of this pandemic?
Yeah, I don't make any friends during budget season, unfortunately. I get to say no a lot. I get to say yes sometimes, which is great, but I do get to say no a lot. We are in much better fiscal shape thanks to Andrew Mailer and Lynn Savage. They really took the time and had the discipline to save. And that puts us kind of in a unique spot. We're also unique in the fact that the majority of our budget is actually funded by residential taxes. And so, we're not seeing that bottom out like we're seeing other things bottom out in local receipts. So, for instance, meals tax, not doing great. Did not sell any passports this year. Little things that were affected that we didn't really think about. But we're not seeing that with property values yet. And so we've been in pretty good shape. This was a tough budget year, don't get me wrong, right? The budget was only able to increase by 2.3%. Mm-hmm. We had a level funded budget across the board for pretty much everybody. It was tough, but the department heads really buckled their belts and did what they needed to do to make it work, and I was so proud of them for doing that. We have a lot of new projects coming on, including Amazon, right? We just got, it actually ends up being about $6.2 million in Amazon permit fees. We've got a lot of capital needs coming up that we're trying to address, and we have done a good job of preparing for those. And so, yeah, it may be, definitely fiscal year 22 is going to be hard. Fiscal year 23 may feel some of the aftershocks of that, but I actually think we're in an up rather than a down here in North Andover financially.
Really good to see that. As leaders, we all need to try to figure out how we build consensus. For you, as a town manager, how do you build consensus with your peers, and those might be the select board, but also all those 161 employees? And then, by the way, we have a community of 30,000 plus people. Mm-hmm. How do you what's your style in building consensus?
Yeah, definitely listening. People really want to be heard. A lot of the time I can't agree, or maybe there's nothing I can do, right? And sometimes people will come to me with an issue that really I don't have any jurisdiction over. But I can listen, and I can be empathetic, and I can offer support in ways that I can, and that means a lot to people, a lot. And letting people have a voice and being part of a process is also really important. We don't want things to happen behind closed doors and then be announced, or not have people feel like they were part of a process. At the end of the day, it may not always turn out the way everybody wanted it. But it does allow me and the select board to make more rational and reasonable decisions when we've heard from people. And I think a lot of the hard part about municipal government generally in just life, right, is that most of the time we're not paying attention. I know at home I'm not paying attention until something really is impactful to me, mm-hmm. right? But we've tried to find ways to reach more people so that we're hearing from everyone, right? Because if something isn't impactful to you, or it's not impactful negatively, you may not feel the need to lend your voice, but your voice is important all the time. And so we've started to use more survey applications. We use a really interesting survey from California where basically you sign up in advance, you get texted about the survey. It's about 48 hours. It's called Flash Vote. You get a text about the survey's open. It's about 5 questions long. It's open for 48 hours only. So it builds a lot of excitement, right, about the survey. And then everyone gets the results at the same time, right? So I get the results at the exact same time that Joe Smith, who lives at 39 Great Pond Road, gets the results, right? Because a lot of the time, with the Survey Monkey or something else, did Joe Smith take the survey 19 times, right? This is actually data relevant, statistically relevant. So that's been a really interesting tool for us. And sometimes it's a painful tool, right? Because people might write comments that hurt, or maybe that we didn't want to hear, but it's really important for us to hear them. Sure. So, that's been something that we've implemented that I've really liked to help us build consensus. But I also think that if you just approach things in a really fair and rational way, it's helpful. So for instance, Monday night we talked about the pond, right? Sure. We talked about the rates and the fees and how do we handle that moving forward. And one of the things that we talked about was rolling out a longer term plan and educating people about it, right? And creating a mechanism for people to be able to tell us how they feel about it. So that at the end of the day, when we do have to increase the rates, because inevitably we will, right? Because costs increase, because minimum wage is increasing and it costs more for the supplies, and it's not a shock to people, right? It's something that people expected. And I think when you expect something, when you've talked about it, when you've educated people, when you've heard from them, right? So important, heard, right? We listened. It's easier to build consensus because we've all been a part of that process.
So well said. I look at sometimes two positions that don't stay forever. I look at school superintendents, which seem to be almost a turnstile, and then I look at town managers, and you've only been here, so we are not pushing you out the door. We're hoping you stay forever. But when it's all said and done, you'll probably at some point move to another community or do something else. How would you like to be remembered in terms of your leadership here in North Andover?
So interesting. I probably would not have, I know I would not have left Sudbury for a long time if it hadn't been for the commute. And here, it's a lovely commute, and it's a lovely community. And so I don't have any plans to go anywhere anytime soon, as long as you'll have me. But, I think when people look back on me, I hope that they think I was fair, that I was progressive, and that we got things done, that we made a lasting effect that improved the quality of people's lives. I'm the first female town manager, so, I hope people remember that. I was not the first female in Sudbury, I was the second female in Sudbury, but there's not a lot of women town managers. Dee and I both belong to the Women Leading Government Committee for the Mass Municipal Association, and we've been working on trying to get more women to go into the business, because it's really, there's not a lot of candidates out there generally, right? Sure. And a lot of the time, I think, especially younger women, right? When I became town manager, I was maybe 30. I was 30. And you're thinking, I've got little kids, and how am I going to manage this, and how am I going to manage my time, and what's my work-life balance going to be like? And so we've been really trying to build other women up to come into the business as well, because it's a hugely important vantage point that some communities are missing. And so, I hope people look back and just remember me as being fair, and getting things done that was right for the community, because that's all I'm trying to do every day.
Absolutely. We here at the Youth Center try to build young leaders. Very impressed. During the pandemic, I was telling at our council meeting this morning how impressed I am with the kids that have worked for us the last year, how serious they take the safety protocols and trying to grow this program. We're seeing such great future leaders here. What would you, who's been through this now, what would be your advice to some of my high school seniors, my college seniors, that are heading out to their first maybe professional experience where leadership is going to have to come into play? What's your advice to these young people?
Sure. So, I was so impressed with your group last year. Just to start, they were amazing. We got literally no complaints. I can't remember a single year of camp that I've run anywhere else, not here. I'm sure there's never any complaints at Rick's camp, but where there wasn't issues, and they just stepped up, and it was really, really impressive. I think saying to people, I think of things I echo to my own kids. It's okay to screw up. It's okay for it to be hard, because it is hard, especially right now. It's okay to admit that it's hard. And it's okay to take a step back and revisit what you thought you were going to do. I always say the most interesting people I know didn't know what they wanted to do when they grew up. I still maybe don't know what I want to do when I grow up, right? We're all working it out, and that's okay. I screwed up. I'm sure Rick has screwed up. And we just keep coming back to it. We just keep trying, right? And I think that's really important. And, as a leader, I think remembering that you're always just trying to do the right thing, that's like your northern star, right, is what you think is right. But also really being a listener to those around you, because what you think is right may not be right for everybody, and that's okay too. And this isn't an easy time to live. I don't envy the kids who are going to college right now or graduating from high school, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, but it's going to get better, right? And it's going to be okay. And it's okay to live at home for a while. I did that till I was 25. Mm-hmm. And I have less student loans because of it, so pay attention to that. But I think that at the end of the day, if you always just do your best and you're always trying to do what's right, you'll come out okay.
Totally great advice. All right, we know you're a very busy person, so we're going to let you go, but we can't let you go without giving our five leaders. So with each one of our guests, we give you no preparation on this. We're just going to throw out 5 leaders' names and tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. It can be one word, it can be a couple sentences, it can be a reason, and let you think. All 5 of these are leaders in certain disciplines. So I'll start off with the first one, Elon Musk.
I'm laughing because last night when I was doom scrolling like everyone else on Twitter before they go to bed, there was a lot of drama about Elon Musk because he's supposed to be on SNL as a host, and the SNL cast is revolting. So I think, Elon Musk is the kind of person who he just marches and he moves forward, and I think that's something to be applauded. But I also think it's really important to remember that everything that we say as leaders is important too and is listened to. And so we have to be really careful about what we do. And Rick, I'm sure, sees this too, right? Like things that we write on Twitter or things that we write on Facebook, or, God forbid if we didn't follow some of the governor's mandates for mask wearing, right? Or gatherings. I am very careful that I'm making sure I'm doing things that would represent the town in the best possible light at all times, at home and here. And I think when you're a leader, what you say matters. So, I'm not that surprised to see the people on SNL revolting in some ways about that, so he's certainly interesting.
Yeah. It's funny, my favorite phone call from you last summer, about 6 times, was a very quick comment, was everybody's wearing masks, correct? And it was just a subtle way, because you were probably getting some questions of whether we were, and it was a nice way to saying, make sure they are wearing masks. But next one is someone that I think is a great leader, but probably not as visible because of her husband, Melinda Gates.
Yeah, she's the kind of person or kind of leader that I think is a supporter. And those leaders are really important too. Not all leaders are the perfect person you see, right? My husband and I have this conversation all the time, that somebody's always second, right? And that second person is sometimes actually probably more successful in many ways than the top person, right? I mean, I think when you think about that, when you're the second in command, you probably can be a lot more effective. You can get a lot more done. And she's been an amazing supporter, but has also shown and shined so many ways on her own. And I think that's really impressive. She's never allowed herself to be in a shadow, right? And that's a pretty impressive way to be.
Absolutely. Someone that was a big leader, obviously, before we were really alive, but someone that I believe we still feel the effects of every day, and that's Martin Luther King.
I remember reading Martin Luther King's poems when I was little and feeling hope, right? And this year and now, right, I read Martin Luther King's poems and I still feel hope. And I think that's an amazingly effective person who's managed to make me feel impassioned and hopeful and emotional over a 40-year period of my life. Never mind how long he's been making other people feel that way too. And I think, that's a transitional leader. And you don't see that many people like that who can appeal to so many different generations through his words. I mean, it's pretty incredible. We're lucky.
Really are. Someone that is a leader to my young people, and I actually put her up to a lot of this, is Greta Thunberg in terms of her leadership with climate control.
It's so motivating to see someone like that. I was watching Nickelodeon with my daughter last week, and there was a special on climate change, and she was asking me all kinds of questions. She's 8. All kinds of questions about it that I couldn't answer. And she knew more answers than I knew, I think. She was educating me. And I'm thinking back to when I was 8 years old, right? And I'm probably playing Game Boy and putting posters of Tiger Beat on my wall. And she's talking about, climate change and how we shouldn't be using plastic straws, and why don't I shut the water off when I brush my teeth, right? And, you're thinking about that and you're like, geez, this generation has a mind of its own, and people talk about millennials, they talk about Gen X, what do we call this next generation who is just coming up motivated for change? I mean, it's so impressive.
It is, really is. Last but not least is somebody that I think gets unfairly polarized. Obviously, I'm a fan, but I think this is an interesting guy that has interesting leadership and how he handles things. Anthony Fauci.
Oh, so I think it's funny to have watched his transition over the last few months. Anthony Fauci, to me, so my primary care physician's name is Dr. Stratton. He's in Everett, and I will do anything Dr. Stratton tells me to do. He is the boss of my health. Dr. Fauci is in that same box for me. He is someone I've just grown to trust, and I think it's because he's human. He's normal. He delivers with humor, which I think is such an important way to deliver information, and he's really ingrained a sense of trust in me that I never would have expected failing in a public official over the last year, right? And you're right, he's been a polarizing figure in ways that I don't think he ever assumed. Mm-hmm. You think about it, he's been doing this for decades. And suddenly thrust into the limelight in a way that I'm sure he didn't expect, but he handled it with just such humility, and he's grown into it. Right, and seeing him do the media junkets now, he looks so comfortable in his own skin, right? And I think what type of leader that is, to be able to stand up and say things that are hard, right? It's controversial. Not everyone believes, not everybody agrees. He's saying things that maybe don't always give us hope, right? But he's delivering it in a way that makes me feel like it's going to be okay, and I think that's really poignant.
Yeah, very well said. This has been phenomenal. So we're going to give you our last word. And I think it has been tough during the pandemic because I think a lot of people know you through Zoom. They don't really know you in person. We are getting to that point, folks. Better days are ahead. What would be your final word to the residents of North Andover?
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess to start, thank you, right? It's been a tough year, but it's been a good year because of all of you. And so many of you have motivated me and surprised me and really made me feel so warm and welcome by the way you've treated the rest of the community. We've banded together over this last year, not just in mask wearing and not just in social distancing and not by just all agreeing to walk around the common in the same direction, which I appreciated, but also by giving back. We formed a food bank. Like, who would have ever thought we'd do that? And I would meet people I had never met before where they were putting their food inside the brown bin outside the senior center, right? I mean, we served lunch every day. We handed out books, and you were all a part of that, a huge part of that, and we couldn't have done it without you. And, I think of people like the Kindness Collaborative, Representative Minicucci, who's been just a friend through all of this, and, the select board, who's been so supportive. I've never had a more supportive board. And I can't say thank you enough for welcoming me to this community in the way you have, but also for just being what the true meaning of community is. So thank you.
Such a great final word. We are heading to better days, and as we said at the beginning of the pandemic, we're in this together, and together we'll get through this. And I think, Melissa, your final word is directly to that. I think North Andover we are a good community. We're a community that is willing to look in the mirror. We'll correct things that need to be corrected, and we're going to keep growing. And your leadership is going to help us do that. So I want to thank you once again for coming on the Youth-Centered Podcast.
Thank you, Rick.
And next week, we will be bringing on the fourth of our series, and it'll be administrator from the Greater Lawrence Family Health Center, Rich Napolitano. And we're going to be talking about their amazing rollout of the vaccination and the leadership that went into that. From basically the federal government contacting them to basically rolling it out completely. And I've known Rich for many, many years, and it's going to be great to hear from him. And then some of the stuff that he does outside of his professional life in terms of leadership. So as we finish every podcast, we say too much passion is never enough passion.